Room service if I like, I order twice. Hibachi, got the gravy on the rice. Rolling in Mexico.
Pittsburgh Steelers fans, welcome into another edition of the Steelers Q&A. My name is Jeremy Betts. Welcome in to the show where it is all about you, the listener. We are here to answer your questions about the Pittsburgh Steelers, about the NFL, about whatever you want to talk about here on the Steel Curtain Network. And joining me this week is my good buddy Shannon White. Shannon, it's been a while. How you doing, man? Hope you had a Merry Christmas.
We did have a Merry Christmas. Hope you did as well. And it has been a while, but when you hollered at me, I said, that's great. I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, man. You're always game for a good time, right? And we have a good time on this show. I appreciate you hopping on. And I wish that I could say it was under better circumstances for Steelers Nation. Now, I say that with the knowledge that we are in the playoffs, right? The Pittsburgh Steelers have clinched a playoff berth. But for something that felt maybe a lot better, this has been kind of a downward spiral, if you will, since week 13 about. And I titled the episode 3-Game Skid, Casting Clouds on the Steelers Postseason Hopes. I don't know if you remember from the NFL Films playback of the Steelers 2005 Super Bowl season, but that's what the narrator said after the Steelers lost 3 in a row, including, I think it was the Ravens and the Bengals in that stretch, ended up a wild card team, but they rounded it out and won their last 3 in a row before going on a Super Bowl run. So it's happened before, but that's where the line comes from. And we've got a lot of people in the chat, a lot of people ready to talk about the Steelers. So Shannon, let's open it up here, just you and me talking real quick, and then we will bring in some questions, bring in the listeners. But how are we feeling? 10-3 turned into 10-6 before we could blink in 11 days. And it was against teams you were hoping that you would have a better showing against, right? To prove that you belonged in the upper echelon of NFL teams. That did not happen. How are we feeling sitting at 10-6 with one game left to play on the schedule against the Cincinnati Bengals before playoff football comes our way?
Extremely disappointed.
Yeah.
Honestly, I was under the belief, and I said it on recent podcasts before this 3-game skid, that I was expecting they needed another draft and another free agent class to, fill the remaining holes on the roster. And when they were playing so well, and they took control of the division, I was like, well, you got to strike when the iron's hot. I said, it could be this year, it could be some magic. But they had that 3-game, that's the toughest 3 games stretch that I can ever remember for the Steelers in my lifetime, because it's 3 games in 11 days. And you're playing 3 true contenders. So before they played the Eagles, I said, we're going to learn, is this a contending Steelers team or a pretending Steelers team? Well, now we know they're pretenders. And I've tried to be honest all season. And if you say anything, there's always the excuse. Well, look at all the injuries. Well, you get those guys back and you still don't play well. So there is holes. There's issues. I think we you mentioned the 2005. I think we took a lot of guys for granted. There was so many great players on our team, Hall of Fame players, led by Ben Roethlisberger. I mean, this team does not compare, no matter how you want to look at it, if we're being honest.
Yep.
And there's the issues that have been there are going to continue to flare, because this is the normal formula. They get to the end of the year when good teams are improving, preparing for the playoffs, the Steelers collapse. There's always that, one and done in the playoffs if they get there. So I don't see anything changing this year now, since, they've been exposed.
Yeah, they kind of have. I think Russell Wilson has been exposed. Arthur Smith has been exposed. I think the defense and the simplicity of it has been exposed. They're figuring out.
Yeah.
Yeah. Teams are figuring out that if you mitigate the stars, that you can kind of have your way with it. And, TJ Watt still makes a play or two every game, but his impact has been diminished because teams are throwing the ball quick. They're putting 2 and 3 people out there to chip him at a time. And guys on the backside are getting pressures, but they're not getting home enough. The secondary has some weaknesses. Communication's been really bad. So, and then on the offensive side of the ball, you've got one receiver who can change the ball game for you, and that's Pickens. And every now and then he takes a dirt nap on the field, forgets what he's supposed to do, or doesn't do it because it wasn't going his way. And then, other people that you were hoping would take a leap, have not. You were hoping Van Jefferson would give you more. Obviously, that's who they rode with as their wide receiver 2 for the majority of the year. You were hoping that Najee Harris could give you more, and he had a good start to the season, a good yardage at the halfway mark. He was looking more explosive, and then it just all tapered off, and you're left with Jaylen Warren and not much else out of the backfield. And so it's just kind of been a slog the last 3 weeks specifically, and the better teams are winning and the Steelers are falling behind. And it is pretty frustrating to look at. And, after a 10-3 start, you felt like, man, the sky's the limit with this team. They have a chance at the 1 seed potentially in this Christmas Day matchup against the Chiefs. And instead, they were just there to be the doormat for the Chiefs on their way into the welcome of the 1 seed. So it's rough. It's really tough. And, Brian Legaretta on here says, sucks to lose 3 in a row, but I think being the 5th seed at Houston is a better matchup than at home versus the Chargers. We got to play better, though, but strictly because Houston is struggling. Thoughts? I'd say this is the silver lining in the cloud, but you better watch out, Pittsburgh. If you keep losing, you might find yourself the 7th seed headed to Buffalo or the 6th seed headed to Baltimore, and not even the 5th seed headed to Houston. So the ship has to be righted at some point, as Brian mentions here. Got to play better. But Shannon, is this silver lining enough to make you feel like the Steelers still have a shot in the playoffs, or is this like you were saying, one and done? Or if they win, it's going to be because they drew the best matchup, and then they're going to get their tails whipped in the second round?
Well, if I'm being totally honest, I don't think they're going to win another game this year.
Yeah.
And the reason why is it's not just losing, it's how they're losing. They're not competitive. They're getting out physical. They're getting pushed around. The tackles in the offense, but especially the tackles last game were hideous. I mean, Wilson's running for his life. When your rookie center, 2nd round pick, and I love Frazier, but he's by far their best lineman. And it ain't even close. And I knew he's going to be good, but is that now because he's so good or the rest of them so bad? Yeah. Dan Moore should never step foot on the field after this year, not in the Steelers uniform. And I know a lot of people, they want, well, there we go. Yeah, I'm not going to hold back. I've never seen 2 men and tackles get bull rushed as badly as they do. It don't matter. It don't have to be a TJ Watt or Myles Garrett. It could be a nobody, somebody I never even heard of, and they're putting them right back in the quarterback's lap like that.
Yeah.
Their technique's awful. They're not fundamentally sound. As you said, there's one wide receiver. These other guys are like role players. And Pickens can't be a wide receiver 1 because he acts like he's 2 years old. Any of us that's had children had a 2-year-old knows what a 2-year-old tantrum is. If it don't go his way and the play's on the other side of the field, he's just stomping around and pulling his helmet off and acting like he's 2 years old. I mean, there's more to being a number 1 wide receiver than just being talented. There's dedication, there's work ethic, there's maturity, character, all these things he don't have. And they can't pay him like he does. So now they got to find the wide receiver 1. I would not give him a big contract. And then on defense, they're overpaid. and overrated. I mean, I feel sorry for TJ because when you play a 17-game season now and you're getting chipped and double teamed and triple teamed all year, now he's injured. Now he's wore down. It's the end of the year. You can tell he ain't the same. I mean, but you get hit by multiple guys every play. Not even count when you make contact with the ball carrier. So he's just wore down.
Yeah.
And he's older. So, as you said, there's just so many problems when, they want to, if you say anything at all about the Steelers, about how they're playing, they say, you're being negative. You're being negative. Well, when they're playing like crap, and you honestly point that out, it's going to be negative, but it ain't because we're being negative. It's because they're playing bad.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean.
Just calling it like it is, right?
Yeah. All we're trying to do is just keep expectations realistic and, share what we're seeing. And I'm sorry, but this is the same thing that keeps happening every year. And they're going to keep talking about no losing seasons and all that kind of stuff. Well, the Steelers used to be about something more.
Yeah.
And it was Super Bowl, chasing the Super Bowl, not having a losing season. So, I mean, if we change, I know that a lot of my colleagues love this, but if you change nothing, nothing changes. That's something, and I'm telling you, until something happens, that's what we're dealing with.
Yeah, and there's been some changes, right? But it seems like that those changes only go so far, and so that's when you have to have honest conversations about who's running the show, who's at the top, and that's where a lot of Steelers fans don't want to go. I've been reluctant to go there because I like Mike Tomlin.
As do I. Yes.
Yeah, and I think that he, maybe it was probably true during the Roethlisberger era, especially early on. He was kind of the perfect transition coach from Bill Cowher because he could keep the mojo going, keep the energy going in that locker room that was led by so many Hall of Fame and perennial All-Pro veterans. And then when those guys started to trickle out, that's when the standard started to lower, right? And then Roethlisberger's injury in 2019 was really the turning point for this team. And you realize Mike Tomlin is a fantastic motivator and a guy who can get his team ready to go to overachieve, right? But when the lights are bright, it's been a mess. It's absolutely been a mess. I was reading through X earlier, and a couple of people were conversing about when the Steelers actually beat a top tier opponent, not the Ravens, not somebody in their division in the last 4 or 5 years. It hasn't happened, Shannon. I mean, it just hasn't happened probably since like 2018 when the Patriots came into Pittsburgh and you win 17-10 and TJ Watt sacks Brady a couple times and you had the pick by Vince Williams, I think it was. It was just. Was
that the game that Joe Hayden made that great interception?
You're right. Joe Hayden made the interception over top of Gronk, was it?
Yep.
Right? Yep. And the Steelers win that one. Since that game, they haven't really beaten an opponent of note late in the season at all. It's just it's just kind of the same stuff. Early in the year, they get the jump on people because the defense is ready to play and offenses are still figuring themselves out. They take advantage when they play bad teams most of the time. Every now and then they lay a dud, but and then they work themselves into this range. This was a little better this year, right? You start out with those 10 wins in 13 games, and so you felt like something was a little bit different. And then the stretch run hit, the part where we were all concerned about. And I'd always said if they go 2-2 over the final 4 games, they'll be in great shape. I think they now their best chance is 1-3 in that regard, and that's a problem. And Corey Eckenroth was on here a little bit earlier and very positive. He says 10 or 11 wins was the ceiling. They're at that now. They can beat the Bengals and hopefully play Macaulay Culkin and company to get the defense right just in time for the playoffs. That's a positive outlook. But at this point, it feels like, is that the best case scenario for the Steelers that you beat a bad Cincinnati defense and then get Houston, and you're still not really legit. You're just kind of better than what's left at that point. It's hard to tell. And I think, again, once you get to the point where the Steelers are going to have to beat a team, a really good team, to move forward, I just don't trust them at all to be able to do it or to even make it competitive. I think that's a problem as well.
I think we've got to the point as a fan base that a lot of people are willing to accept to be slightly better than mediocre. If you're better than mediocrity, I mean, the Steelers played those first 13 opponents. They were teams that were middle of the pack at best, and the Steelers struggled to beat a lot of them, but they did. They're not blowing out anybody either. But then when you actually play the upper crust, the teams that you should be striving to beat and be like, they're getting killed. The Philly game, the Baltimore game, and the Kansas City game were not competitive. And it just, I think the whole, or take down the sign that says the standard is the standard. Take that down, or, start over, do something. It was 4 years ago, maybe. I said you should not have the highest paid player in any position if they're not going to make you a true contender.
Yeah.
Because that money can be spread out. Look at Green Bay. Green Bay is going to be right in the thick of things. They might be a year away, but they're going to be right there.
Yeah.
And they got the youngest roster in the NFL. I think it's 25.7 years average per position.
Yep.
They have no high-priced guys anywhere close to the top, but they spread that wealth out. They go 5 receivers deep. I mean, if you want to look at somebody, now that's the way the Steelers used to be. But they didn't have the quarterback for years. So when they did get Ben, because teams like Cleveland and all passed on him, they got Ben, they won Super Bowls.
Right.
So I think that we're somewhere along the line, we're going to have to bite the bullet and accept that there has to be serious changes.
Yeah.
And it might mean that they're not as good and they have a losing season or two. But if not, we're just going to have this.
Yeah. It seems to be something that, it seems to be a rut that the Steelers just cannot get out of. And when that happens, the questions start flowing about the people at the top. And that's just the way it goes. It doesn't help that they don't have a great quarterback, but like you were saying, in the early 2000s, in the 1990s, they were still in that divisional round AFC Championship conversation most every year, and then they finally got the quarterback, and they went to 3 Super Bowls in a 5-year span, right? And it was just all of a sudden it all came together because you got the quarterback, and the Steelers are going to have to do that again at some point. And unfortunately, they have aging stars. TJ Watt is aging. Cam Hayward is aging. You're going to have to replace those guys at some point too. And I just don't know if the Steelers had the formula under Tomlin to reset. They probably are just going to maintain over the next couple years while he's finishing out his contract, this type of, can we add somebody who can just put us over the top, as opposed to resetting the roster and getting getting better across the board. And at the game's most important position, the quarterback position.
Yeah. How many times have we both heard it? All of us have heard it. Oh, there's tons of teams that love to have him. I understand that. I like the man. I really do. I think he's a great motivator. I think he's a player's coach. I think he knows talent. He's not a tactician. He's not a strategist. He has to have the coordinators to help him. And for some reason, they can't get him. I don't know if it's they won't pay for him or who's making these final decisions, but they have not been able to give him the coordinators to grow. And you say, well, the thing is he had so much talent he inherited from Cowher's teams, and Cowher didn't get it done either till the end.
Yeah.
But, the carryover, the key was Ben and Troy and Porter, and all these guys. And so we have to remember, Harrison more than Porter, but you know what I'm saying. But
yeah,
we're not seeing that anymore.
Yeah.
And it's all one-sided. They're top heavy on defense as far as salary, and there's not enough money spent on the offensive side to have the necessary talent to not be top heavy.
Yeah.
And I don't know but again, yes, there's a lot of teams that would love to have him. But if Andy Reid would have stayed in Philly, would he have ever won anything?
Yeah, no.
I don't think he would have, because he had to have, as you said, you got to get that quarterback.
Yeah. Absolutely have to address that at some point, and the Steelers have been trying. I'm not knocking them for not trying necessarily, but they're also, I think, searching in the wrong areas. Middle of the first round isn't going to do it. Washed up veteran or aging veterans is probably not going to do it. Justin Fields was a great attempt, right? To me, that's probably the path forward here is Justin Fields and bringing in a rookie of some kind, or a veteran to help him out while you prep for 2026, whatever it is. But I think that conversation we can obviously hit more in the off season here with games left to play, but very, very interesting how the Steelers are going to play this out. We're going to go ahead and take a break here on the audio side. If you're watching live, we're not going anywhere. We'll be right back after this, but stay tuned. The Steelers Q&A will be right back. And we are back here on the Steelers Q&A. Jeremy Betts and Shannon White joining me this week to break down the Steelers and where we're at. Shannon, we've got some super chats I want to bring up here. Danny Littlejohn says, DeShawn and Cam comments were about who is his question. And Dan Moore Jr. shake my head. He obviously listens to Shannon White talk about Dan Moore Jr. And his love-hate relationship, mostly hate relationship with Dan Moore Jr. But yeah, this is a good question. DeShawn and Cam's comments, who are they about? Who is that 11th guy that's just not in the right position? That's not handling their assignment the right way, where the communication's off, that they've been talking about. And, I made the argument, and it's going to come out on Jeff's show tomorrow on the Let's Ride podcast. I wasn't sure Cam was actually speaking about a specific individual. I think he was more or less laying out that that even if 10 guys are doing what they're supposed to and one guy is not, then it's all going to go down the tank anyway, because you've got to have all 11 guys communicating and being in the right spot. So I don't know if he was calling out somebody specific. DeShawn Elliott, on the other hand, I felt was calling out somebody, and I thought it lent more towards the coaching staff for not making necessary changes in either schematic or personnel or certain situations. So your take on this, though, Shannon, what were DeShawn Elliott and Cam Hayward's comments about? Were they about a specific person, or do you think that there's a blame game to be played with somebody on the defense for the reason why they're giving up an average of 30 points over the last 4 weeks?
Wouldn't we love to know?
Yeah.
I mean,
that's what
honestly, I don't want a Steeler player to call out another player. We don't ever want that to happen. That's not the way you handle things. That should be handled behind closed doors in the locker room, one-on-one. But I agree with you. I think it's a little bit calling out certain players, not just one, but every time there's a breakdown, a lot of times it's a communications breakdown and there's somebody wide open. And also I agree about the coaching, because it's very vanilla. They're starting to try to blitz a little bit.
Yeah. Late
in the season, it's too late. They don't have their timing down. They don't have the communication on the back end down. So again, things that should have happened. I've always been critical that they slow played the rookies.
Yeah.
Well, that's really not been an issue. They're playing these guys. So I was happy about that. But they haven't really opened up their schemes at all and tried to become more aggressive until they realized that I think they never even sacked Mahomes, did they?
No, 0 sacks.
So it's 36, I think, still there's one more game to go.
Yeah.
This is by far the fewest they've had in a long time.
Yeah.
And if they're not getting consistent pressure. It's Watt, Highsmith, Herbig, Hayward gets a little bit, but we're seeing, I think that they really addressed the offensive line. And I think there's some potential there for improvement down the line when you have people playing in the right positions and Fautanu actually gets to play and stuff like that. But now they're going to have to focus on defensive line, wide receiver, and secondary in this upcoming draft. They have to, because like you said, they don't really have a top receiver. They need size on the interior on the defensive line. Ogunjobi just ain't cutting it. I mean, Ben is not taking a step forward like we all hoped he would. But Ogunjobi, he's notorious. He'll make a splash play here or there, but watch the rest of the game. He's invisible.
Yep. So, I felt like Keanu Benton has played well, but you're right. He hasn't turned into a superstar, and we thought that could be something that he propelled to this year.
Yeah, I thought that'd be a step up, but it hasn't happened.
Yeah. It's been solid, but it hasn't been great. And I'm not like out on him by any means yet. I think he's still going to be a great player, but you're right. It's just kind of like outside of the stars, the supporting cast has just kind of been blah this year, especially in the second half of the season. You've been giving up ever since the bye week, you've been giving up big points. It was 26 to Washington. You have these 3 games in a row, 27, 34, and 29. And then, the Bengals put up, what was it? 41, 42 or something like that in their game against us. Yeah. So the Steelers defense is just a sieve for points in the second half of the season. That's got to get fixed somehow. I don't know if they can fix it though. And the offense is going to have to do more than what we've been seeing. But another super chat here, for this one from Thomas Eads. Thank you, Thomas, for the $5 donation. I'm a big Tomlin fan, but when is it going to be a playoff win team instead of a non-losing seasons team? The standard needs to change. I think we all agree with you there, Thomas, that the standard of excellence that we have been hoping for, or that we are used to in Pittsburgh, it's changed within the organization, but Steelers fans still have the same expectations, and where that doesn't match is where there's a lot of consternation here. A couple people have mentioned this, and I'm going to bring up John Edborg. Mike T has to accept a coaching style change. The game left him behind technically. He can still lead and motivate. I think this is a very good observation, and I think that even though he's so the Arthur Smith hiring, right? Arthur Smith runs a modern offense based on running the football, play action. So he's got I think he's got good concepts. I think you see Tomlin's hand, though, in the running of the offense. I think it's very conservative. I think Tomlin puts a lid on things and doesn't want there to be a lot of, I don't know. He just doesn't want it to reach its potential for fear that it will also break the game because of turnovers, etc. And I mean, you see his point a little bit. The Steelers went off on 2 drives against the Chiefs, right? They went right down the field. They scored a touchdown. It got called back by penalty, and then Russ throws a pick on the next play. So you open things up, and there's a turnover. You've had Russ put the ball on the ground a couple times. You've had Pat Freiermuth put a ball on the ground. So I think Tomlin plays scared in those situations and doesn't let the offense continue to improve and develop because he's always got a lid on it of some kind. So I don't know what you think about that, but that's kind of how I feel where that game has left him behind a little bit. I agree. He can still lead and motivate, but he just doesn't want to let the explosive plays happen for fear of the negative results potentially.
I totally agree. I agree with this comment. I agree with your assessment. 2 things I wanted to mention. On the interception, when Wilson threw that ball, and they pointed it out on the live broadcast, Pickens was supposed to draw Reed over.
Yep.
And that way he would not have been in the picture, and conceivably that ball would have dropped right into Freiermuth. The problem is Pickens quit on the play.
Yep.
He went out about 10 yards, and then he stopped and he was watching. I mean, he just stopped. When do you ever teach anybody just to stop in a route or on the football field? You don't.
Never.
And he thought he was over there, and naturally he was going to pull Reed over. Well, he stopped before because Wilson had to, maneuver a little bit in the pocket. He stopped too soon. That let Reed get back over. See, it ain't always the plays you make. It's the plays that you don't give a full effort that hurts your team. And Pickens, I believe, caused that interception. If he would have just kept going down, floating down the sidelines, he would have pulled Reed over. But by actually coming to a complete stop, he allowed Reed to say, okay, he ate the target, and then he looked back and seen the ball coming. Another thing that we've got to see is, as you said, the game passes you by. When they hired Arthur Smith, we knew he likes to run the ball and play action off of the successful running game. And he likes outside zone. They hired Pete Meyer because he's an outside zone blocker 2 years ago. Okay, you didn't then have an offensive line to fit the scheme. You're getting closer. You've never had a running back that fit it because Harris is a terrible fit for their blocking scheme. You have to have the successful running game for the quarterback to be successful doing the play action off of it. The problem is the two quarterbacks they brought in are not really good at consistently working the play action, because especially Wilson, because he's short and he struggles with his sight line to see, down the field when these guys do come open. So it really wasn't a good fit. It's like they're not thinking, does this peg fit in this hole? It's like, well, we're going to put this assembly of coaches and players together and try to make it work. But you have to draft, you have to hire to fit a certain scheme, and I don't think they've done that.
Yeah, I agree. It's been frustrating because all of the high profile picks and free agent signings, it's all been with a great purpose in mind. The front office, I think, that is building it like you should, front to back. But it does seem like the coaching hires and the actual placing of players in the scheme isn't working. It's just not. It's not correlating from front office decision making to product on the field. So that's definitely a disconnect for the Steelers to have to figure out. And it's been frustrating to watch. After Forad drops us a $5 super chat, says, thanks for all you guys do. We're just you guys, right? Just with a platform here to voice our frustrations or our excitement about the team. And right now it's frustrating. Shannon, I do want to let's bring up a couple more questions here, and then we'll just kind of close out here with a little bit of a conversation about how the rest of the season could go potentially, and what we're looking for, what would be successful at this point, and maybe a little bit of what we're looking forward to for the end of the season. But Vinny Aguakun says, why is the flat always so open on our defense? Teams are just eating it like a jar of candy. It really is. It's been awful the last few weeks. The wheel routes, the flat routes, they've just been kind of wide open, while it seems like the Steelers are trying to take away other areas of the field. Is that a product of the system, or is that a product of players not being in the right position? What do you think, Shannon, for why the flat has been eating the Steelers alive the last few weeks?
That's Dick LeBeau's 3-4 system.
Yeah.
I mean, if you listen to Tom Brady, and he'll talk about it any chance he gets, they destroyed the Steelers because he had no ego, and he would drop the ball into the flats to the running backs. And the one playoff victory in Pittsburgh, I don't remember if it was Kevin Falk or who, had like 14 catches.
Yeah.
I mean, they just repeatedly would dominate by throwing that and throwing to tight end on an out into the flat. I mean, it's always there. And now they have Queen and they have Wilson. They got speed at middle linebacker or inside linebacker. But you can only get out there so fast. And they're just not aggressive enough. This defense is not aggressive enough. Austin has been retained because it's Tomlin's defense, and Austin can be manipulated. He's just a figure. He's a puppet who's there. But they really they have to upgrade at corner, and they have to be more aggressive. They have to mix in more blitzes. That's just how the modern game is played.
Yeah.
As somebody said today, keeping Austin and letting Flores go was a huge mistake.
Huge mistake.
I thought, well, if Flores would have went, but he just become a defensive coordinator, they could have kept him over Austin.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it wasn't like he was taking a step up, but maybe he was more of a threat.
Yeah.
To maybe, be considered as a head coach down the line. So I think that was a big mistake because Flores, if you watch how Minnesota plays, it looks nothing like what the Steelers are doing.
No. And they have far fewer impact players across the board.
Exactly.
They've got a couple good pass rushers and a couple good pieces in the secondary, but outside of that, it's the scheme. It just confuses quarterbacks, and the Steelers could have, the Steelers could have a great combination of scheme and talent. I think if they had kept Flores, I don't think he calls defense the way Mike Tomlin likes to call defense, though. So that definitely does, change the ball game because that's Tomlin's side of the ball. That's what he's operating.
Every team gives up big plays, and Tomlin hates that. He hates turnovers, and he hates allowing big plays on defense. Well, think about what even happened in the Super Bowl when they beat the Cardinals. They give up the long touchdown to Larry Fitzgerald, and then Ben had to lead them back. But what I'm saying is if you play aggressive, also big plays happen for you. Right now, it takes a Herculean effort from Watt or Highsmith or Hayward, create a turnover, whatever. If not, the teams just keep the ball and they're dominating. What is it? 12, 13 play drives, taking it right down the field, cramming it down the Steelers' throat in the end zone. It can't happen.
Yep. I agree with you, Shannon. I agree. It's a tough situation it's a tough space to be in right now as a Steelers fan because you want so much more for the team. They appeared to be showing that at one point, and then it's all just dissipated over the last 3 weeks. And it's hard to find even one, promising thing that has happened over the last 3 weeks. The defense has been bad. The offense has been bad. Nobody's really stepped up and played well. I mean, you got a few splash plays here and there from guys, but outside of that, it's just been poor play across the board. So hard to have a lot of good vibes about this team right now. But that being said, the Steelers for sure have 2 games left to play on their schedule. Mm-hmm. One we know, Cincinnati Bengals in Pittsburgh. Probably going to be a Sunday afternoon game next week. So, the Steelers obviously beat the Bengals earlier in the year. That's not a good defense, not a good team overall. They still got a shot at the playoffs, but it's definitely not a one of the better teams like they've faced the last 3 weeks. Yeah. So you've got that coming up. And then you've got a playoff game. And whether that's they still have a chance to get the 3rd seed and a divisional win if the Ravens somehow lose to the Browns next week and the Steelers can beat the Bengals. I don't see that happening. We'll see. But the most likely scenario is that they're a wild card team going to Houston, going to Baltimore, going somewhere. So give me, Shannon, a best case and worst case scenario for the Steelers moving forward as you see the team now. What's kind of the best you could see the season ending, and what's the worst you could see the season ending for the
Steelers? Well, the best, which is, again, a pipe dream.
Yeah.
That, as you said, that they win against Cincy and the Ravens lose, and the Steelers get a home game. I guess they said it'd probably be the Chargers, I think. Yep. That would be the best because we see what the Chargers did the last time they were in the playoffs. And the Chargers, as a playoff team, have a long history of choking as bad as the Steelers. So they'd both be trying to give the game away in the playoffs. But worst case scenario, it stays, they lose and they end up having to go to Baltimore because I just don't see them beating Baltimore. in Baltimore. I didn't expect it last 2 weeks ago, and I wouldn't expect it in the playoffs, especially. But I love the Steelers more than any one player. I mean, my favorite players, has been Big Ben, Greg Lloyd, Troy Palmer, all these guys down through the years. But I love the Steelers more than I love any individual player, any individual coach. So we're trying to be honest.
Yeah.
And when you're trying to be honest, that's the only way you improve. You have to be honest with yourself. And I think that Tomlin is an honest man. I think he looks in the mirror and he's like, something got to change. We got to do something different. So us saying it is not, we're attacking Tomlin.
Right.
We're just trying to say, but to solve a problem, you first got to identify a problem.
Right. Yeah. So for me, best case scenario is you win in Cincinnati. You beat your opponent in round one of the playoffs and you get to the divisional round. And I think the Steelers are going to be outmatched once you get to that point, completely outmatched by whoever they would play. So for me, best case scenario still, it's kind of what we've been asking for. It's a playoff win, a step in the right direction, and that can still happen. I'm not convinced it will. I probably would not predict it to happen at this point, but that is the best case scenario for the Steelers, in my opinion. The worst case scenario is you lose to Cincinnati and then you lose in the playoffs to whoever you end up playing. You're not competitive. Your defense is looking slow, out of place, let's be honest. None of the Steelers stars, except for Cam Hayward, have had the season they wanted to have.
Nope.
TJ Watt hasn't had the season he wanted to have. Minkah Fitzpatrick hasn't had the season he wanted to have. It's just real talk. I know that those, TJ Watt, I'm not saying he's not a special player anymore. I'm not saying he's a bad player at this point in his career. I'm not saying he's lost a step. I'm just saying he hasn't had the season any of us thought he was going to have this year. And then on offense, it's been, good phases and then bad phases. It's been an alternating show of problems. So to me, the worst case scenario here is that you're not competitive. Your stars don't look like stars and your offense falls apart and heads could roll. I mean, Tomlin's got 2 years on his contract after this year, or did he sign a 3-year extension beyond this year?
I thought it was 3, but I could be wrong.
Okay. He's got 2 or 3 years left. Heads are going to roll if things fall apart, and Tomlin's not going to fire himself. So that would have to come from the top. I don't think it's going to happen, but it could be another offseason of turmoil for Pittsburgh. It could be another offseason of what are we going to do at quarterback? Another offseason of what are we doing at a coordinator position? High profile position group coaches. So there's going to be a chance for a garbage dumpster fire meltdown here if the Steelers lose out and it's not competitive in any way, shape, or form. So that's kind of my best and worst case scenarios. It'll probably fall somewhere in the middle. They'll probably beat Cincinnati. They'll probably lose in the playoffs, and you'll feel like, oh, here, same old Steelers. Can't wait till next year's 10-7 run at whatever. So, but that's just my take on it. Shannon, it's been a lot of fun chatting with you. Let the people know where they can find you and what else is coming up for you.
Well, we'll have nothing the rest of this week, but of course Monday is the Steelers hangover at 9:00 with me and my brother Daniel J. And then of course Wednesdays, which we didn't do yesterday because of Christmas, of course, but we'll be Pump Your Brakes back with Brother Tate and Big G. And, we're just really thankful for our SCN family and for all my podcast partners and fellow brethren, and very thankful for, again, the support we received for our community, and hopefully everybody had a very Merry Christmas.
Absolutely. I hope everybody did have a Merry Christmas. And ST Life, I gotta let you know, the thing that is smoking behind me is my Christmas lights outside. I've got one of those projector things that's
I thought it was light.
Putting snowflakes on the window.
See, I couldn't, yeah.
nothing crazy happening here outside
Yep.
of some Christmas lights. But appreciate all of you guys listening. Thank you for your questions. Thank you for your communications to us here, for listening and tuning in. Really appreciate all of you. That's going to do it for us here on the Steelers Q&A. Until next time, for Shannon White, I'm Jeremy Betts. We'll talk to you next time here.